And welcome to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. And today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back. This is Chapter 11. It's titled Corporate Control of Politics, page 170. During the bruising primary election season of 2008, a right-wing group put together a 90-minute hit job on Hillary Clinton and wanted to run it on TV stations in strategic states. The Federal Election Commission ruled that the advertisements for the documentary were actually campaign ads and thus fell under the restrictions on campaign spending of the McCain-Feingold Act and thus stopped them from airing. Corporate contributions to campaigns have been repeatedly banned and in various ways since 1907, when Republican President Teddy Roosevelt pushed through the Tillman Act. Citizens United, the right-wing group, sued to the Supreme Court with right-wing hitman and former Reagan Solicitor General Ted Olson, the man who argued Bush's side of Bush v. Gore, as their lead lawyer. This new case, Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, presented the best opportunity for the Roberts Court to use its 5-vote majority to completely rewrite the face of American politics, rolling us back to the pre-1907 era of the robber barons. And if there was one man to do it, it was John Roberts. Although he was handsome with a nice smile and photogenic young children, Roberts was no friend to average working Americans. If anything, he was the most radical judicial activist appointed to the court in more than a century. He'd worked most of his life in the interest of the rich and powerful and was chomping at the bit for a chance to turn more of America over to his friends. As Jeffrey Toobin wrote in The New Yorker, quote, "In every major case since he became the nation's 17th Chief Justice, Roberts has sided with the prosecution over the defendant, the state over the condemned, the executive branch over the legislative, and the corporate defendant over the individual plaintiff. Even more than Scalia, who has embodied judicial conservatism during a generation of service on the Supreme Court, Roberts has served the interests and reflected the values of the contemporary Republican Party." End of quote. And the fastest way the modern Republican Party could recover its power over the next decade was to immediately clear away all impediments to unrestrained corporate participation in electoral politics. If a corporation likes a politician, it can ensure that he is elected every time. If it becomes upset with a politician, it can carpet bomb her district and with a few $1 million worth of ads and politically destroy her. In the Citizens United case, the Roberts courts listened to arguments and took briefs and even discussed it among themselves as if they were going to make a decision. But instead of deciding the case on the relatively narrow grounds on which it had originally been argued, whether a single part of a single piece of legislation, in this case McCain-Feingold, was unconstitutional, the court asked for it to be re-argued in September 2009 and asked that the breadth of the arguments be expanded to re-examine the rationales for Congress to have any power to regulate so-called free speech by corporations. In this, they were going along with a request from Theodore B. Olson, who argued Bush v. Gore and would not just look at this narrow case, but go back nearly 20 years to re-examine and perhaps overturn their own ruling in the Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce case, where the court held that it was constitutional for Congress to pass limits on corporate political activities, as well as its decision in 2003 to uphold McCain-Feingold as constitutional. The setup for this 2010 decision came in June of 2007 in the Federal Election Commission versus Wisconsin Right to Life case, in which the Robert courts ruled that the FCC could not prevent Wisconsin Right to Life from running ads just because it was a corporation. The idea of Congress passing laws that limited corporate free speech was clearly horrifying to both Roberts and Scalia. Scalia went after the 1990 Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce case, in which the then Rehnquist court had ruled that the Michigan Chamber of Commerce was limited in its free speech in a political campaign because it was a corporation. Scalia complained this Austin was the only pre-McConnell case that this court had ever permitted the government to restrict political speech based on the corporate identity of the speaker. Austin upheld state restrictions on corporate independent expenditures, and God forbid the statute had been modeled after the federal statute that BCRA 203 amended. End of quote. The Austin case, Scalia concluded, with 4 others nodding, was a significant departure from ancient First Amendment principles. In my view, it was wrongly decided. Scalia was quoted at length from opinions in the Grosjean v. American Press 1936 case. In Scalia's words, quote, holding that corporations are guaranteed the freedom of speech and of press, safeguarded by the due process of law clause of the 14th Amendment. He also quoted the 1986 Pacific Gas and Electric Company versus Public Utility Commission of California case. The identity of the speaker is not decisive in determining whether speech is protected. Corporations and other associations, like individuals, contribute to the discussion, debate, and the dissemination of information and ideas that the First Amendment seeks to foster. The bottom line for Scalia was, quote, the principle that such advocacy is at the heart of the First Amendment's protection and is indispensable to decision-making in a democracy is no less true because the speech comes from a corporation rather than an individual. The book, Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back.
From studios underwritten in part by Sputnik Radio, this is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Okay, we've got a serious crisis on our hands here, and I want to lay out two different ways to do it. The first, well, let me lay out the crises first. Obviously, there are multiple. I mean, there's thousands, hundreds, well, probably thousands of large and small issues that are at stake, from the future of Social Security all the way down to, whether we're going to protect our waterways under this new administration, and with Republican control of the House of Representatives, and the Senate. But there is a larger issue, and that is that 33 state legislatures are now controlled by Republicans. It only takes 34 states, according to the Constitution, to call for a constitutional convention and literally rewrite the Constitution. The Republicans are one state away from what I believe is the final goal of the petro-billionaires and, well, broadly, the billionaire class and the corporate class of rewriting our Constitution. You will recall that David Koch, back in 1980, when he ran for vice president on the Libertarian platform, that party platform, which you can easily Google, you might want to plug Bernie Sanders' name into the Google because he's reprinted it over at his website at sanders.senate.gov. Anyhow, the platform calls for the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid, the repeal of federal campaign finance laws. I'm reading verbatim from the Libertarian Party platform that David Koch ran for president on. Keep in mind, the Republicans would not control today the House, the Senate, the White House, in my humble opinion, without David and Charles Koch and without all the money and all the groundwork over decades that they have spent preparing for this. Deregulation of the medical insurance industry, repeal of the fraudulent and oppressive Social Security system, abolition of the governmental postal service. We oppose all personal and corporate income taxation. There goes the 13th Amendment, including capital gains taxes. We support the eventual repeal of all taxation. All criminal and civil sanctions against tax evasion should be terminated immediately. End the minimum wage. Complete separation of education and state. Government schools lead to the indoctrination of children. Government ownership, operation, regulation, and subsidy of schools and colleges should be ended. The abolition of the Environmental Protection Agency, the abolition of the Department of Energy, the abolition of the Department of Transportation, privatization of public roads and our national highway system, end the FDA, the FAA. We opposed all government welfare relief projects, aid to poor programs, privatization of inland waterways, repeal of OSHA, abolition of Consumer Product Safety Commission, repeal of all state usury laws. That's laws that say that your bank and your insurance company can't charge you too much interest, can't exploit you. That's what David Koch ran for vice president in 1980. And I would say everything I've seen up to this point indicates that, he and his brother still believe in this. The original Charles Koch Foundation is now called the Cato Institute, which continues to advocate, as far as I know, virtually all of these positions. So, we are one state away from the Constitution being rewritten. If the Constitution is rewritten, it's going to be rewritten by Republicans who are beholden to these petro-billionaires. and this is the agenda. So how do we stop that? Back in 2009, 10, 11, back in the day, when the Tea Party was in the process of taking over government, taking over the Republican Party anyway, because that's how we got here. Right? How do you take over your state Republican Party or that was what the Tea Party was concerned about. How do you now take over your state Democratic Party and make it more progressive and make it more active and make it more successful? How do you do that? There was a group called the Concord Project. ConcordProject.org is their website. They put together a series of YouTube videos that and that were distributed also, I believe, on CDs to conservative Tea Party activists around the country, telling people exactly, here's how you take it over. And by the way, they did this. It was successful, and that's why we're where we are right now. I want to share this with you. I went through this 4 years ago on this program at great length, but a lot of you weren't here 4 years ago. I want to reprise this. So we've got some of those videos. I'm going to share them with you. This is just, pieces of them. This is from one of the Concord Project's videos explaining where is the real power in government. This is video 2, part 1, Troy. Here it is.
What's the most powerful political office in the world? It is not the President of the United States. It's precinct committeemen. Why? There's 3 main reasons. First, because precinct committeemen and only precinct committeemen get to elect the leaders of the political parties. If you want to elect the leadership of one of the 2 major political parties in this country, then you have to become a precinct committeeman. What's the most powerful political office in the world?
That was the end of that one. Okay. All right, great. Here's another part of that video. This is part 2, Troy.
Second, precinct committeemen and only precinct committeemen can vote in internal party elections to endorse candidates in the all-important, traditionally very low turnout primary elections. If a candidate wants to win the general election, he first has to get onto the general election ballot. To get on the general election ballot, he has to win the primary election. And the best way to win the primary election is to get the endorsement of as many party committees as possible. Precinct committeemen are organized into committees. For example, every county has a party committee. Every state legislative district has a committee. Legislative districts elect the people's representatives to the state legislature. Second,
see, this is
precinct committeemen.
True of both parties, by the way. And here is part 3 of that. This is
now the third reason you want to become a precinct committeeman is because in some states, when a vacancy occurs in a state legislator office, precinct committeemen and only precinct committeemen, not registered voters, get to nominate 3 nominees to fill the vacancy. The County Board of Supervisors then select the replacement. If, under a system like this, a majority of the precinct committeemen are conservatives, then all 3 nominees will be conservatives and the eventually selected replacement will be a conservative. That's real political power.
You get that? I mean, that is real political power. If in your congressional district, the majority of the precinct committee persons, the precinct committee chairman or whatever they call them, there's got to be a gender neutral term, but maybe not. It probably is in the Democratic Party. But if the majority of the precinct committee people, and maybe even a 51% majority, are progressives, then they can say, okay, every single person, we'll have a primary with as many candidates as you want, 2, 3, 5, 10, no problem, as long as they're all progressives. We will only vote for progressives for primaries. Because the precinct committee people, the party, determines who gets to compete the primary. That way, no matter who wins the primary, you've got a progressive going into the general election. You understand this? This is very straightforward stuff. Back to Concord Project videos. This is this is video 1, part 1. Here's a little more riff on this.
How does one become a precinct committeeman? Bottom line, every state has different rules and procedures for becoming a precinct committeeman with full voting rights within the parties. and each party within each state may have different rules. In Arizona, for example, you must be elected to the office of precinct committeeman. But you don't have to get more than 10 signatures of registered voters from your party or from independents to get your name on the primary ballot. Precinct committeemen in Arizona are not required to pay dues. Ohio's system is similar to Arizona's. Other states require dues and require precinct committeemen attend meetings and sign pledges to support the party's candidates.
Keep in mind, he's talking about the Republican Party. Here's another clip from that.
So how do you find out how it works in your state? The best way is to contact your state or county political party organization and find out where your local party committee meets. Get on the internet and find it. Use the phone book. Call information. Then contact your party organization and find out when and where they meet. Then go to the meeting and ask how one becomes a voting member of the party.
And all across America, whether they were living in a trailer park or a mansion, conservative Republicans, Fox News watchers, people who, Rush Limbaugh listeners who were exposed to that video or videos similar to it or that message said, okay, cool, I'll do that. And the Republicans, now, and from the ground up, literally from the precincts, the congressional precincts, or the precincts within the congressional districts, from the precincts to the congressional districts to the states, the Tea Party, the conservatives, they now call themselves the Freedom Caucus, but it's all still, this thing that's funded by the petrobillionaires. They have taken over 33 state legislatures, both the House and the Senate in 33 states. They need one more state to call for a constitutional convention and completely rewrite our Constitution and basically end the American experiment, in my opinion. Now, they would say that they're taking us back to the original values. I mean, that's a whole nother debate. But we've got to get active. That's step one. Step two, I'm going to talk about after the break, which is how do you influence your existing members of Congress? Stick around. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So call your local Democratic Party and say, I'd like to participate. I might even want to be a precinct committee person. How do I do it? They'll tell you. Welcome back. Let's see here. Bob, watching Free Speech TV in Belgrade, Montana. Hey, Bob, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's on your mind?
Oh, well, thanks, Tom, for everything you're doing.
My pleasure.
Hey, I have a question. Have you ever heard of the story of the Pied Piper?
Since I was 5 years old, sure.
Okay, well, it's like where the Pied Piper was, he was, the townspeople hired him to rid their village of rats.
Right.
And after he got rid of all the rats, they wouldn't pay him. So he decided what he was going to do next was to pipe all the children into the ocean. Am I correct?
I don't remember the ocean part. I thought he took them off and sold them into slavery or something. But whatever, he took their children, yeah.
Yeah. Well, with Trump being the Pied Piper, he's left all the rats behind in Washington, D.C. and all across the nation. And what he's done is he's piped all the people into oblivion.
Yeah, I'm not sure the metaphor is all that strong. The problem is, right now, so far, we don't know. I mean, we have no idea, because Trump had no idea that he was going to become president. And he was totally unprepared for this thing. And we don't know what his administration is even going to look like, much less what their policies are going to be. So,
my way of thinking, I watched that 60 Minutes interview with him, and it seems like it was nothing but mollification to the American public.
Oh, it was Leslie Stahl trying to normalize Donald Trump.
Yeah, everything's going to be fine. Don't worry.
Right.
Don't worry.
Right. Stop panicking.
That's what I'm worried about. So Trump has dredged up the most sociopathic, misanthropic, and corrupt enablers from the dregs of the conservative cesspool to fill his cabinet positions. Case in point, Sarah Palin, for Secretary of the Interior, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems to me these are all people with progressive policy promoters. And everyone that has ever licked his hand or kissed either his hand or his you-know-what has been brought out from under the rocks they've been hiding under since Obama's administration. It sounds kind of harsh, but that's kind of what it seems like to me.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree at all. But what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, what's your suggestion?
Well, I don't know. It's my main question was, what's it going to take to break up the Electoral College so none of this kind of thing happens again? And it doesn't look like it's going to be a possibility in at least my lifetime. So I don't know what we're going to do. I guess just try to keep vigilant and whatever we can do that makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
Well, what I'm suggesting is that we fight back, is that we take over. That we take over first the Democratic Party, that we find, where's the energy, right? The energy in the Republican Party was among the electorate that had been left behind as a result of Reaganomics. They didn't know it was Reaganomics because the media won't talk about policy. Because every time the media does, all these right-wing organizations jump all over them to the point that they're just like, they totally have Stockholm syndrome. And so, but there were all these upset people, and the Republican Party reached out to them. We need to be reaching out to them. And corporate Dems can't do that. Corporate Dems can reach out to Wall Street. They can't reach out to Western Pennsylvania. But progressive Democrats can. And so we need to be working to get more and more progressive Democrats in office. Bob, thanks for the call. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
So we just talked about, how to take over a political party. It's not particularly complicated or difficult. It just requires you to call your local Democratic Party and say, hey, when's the next meeting? I'd like to show up. I'd like to participate. And ultimately, I'd like to be a committee precinct person, because they write the platform, they select the primary nominees, and thus, indirectly, they're determining every single person, they're determining who's going to go to Congress. This is literally the most powerful job in the United States in aggregate. I mean, when you take all the precinct committee people together. So we just talked about that, and I'm going to put this up on the internet, and I hope it gets widely circulated. In the meantime, Emily Ellsworth, who was a former Republican congressional staffer, she's out of Salt Lake City. She used to work for Jason Chaffetz, and she did this very interesting series of tweets that attn.com summarized. But, and I want to share with you. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And by the way, these perfectly echo comments that Bernie Sanders has made over and over and over again on this program. Bernie on this program, people call in and say, what can I do about my congressman? Bernie says, call the local office if you live in the state. Don't call the federal office. Send emails, certainly, but emails tend to get ignored compared to letters. Send letters. When you do, keep it to one issue. They can really only deal with one issue at a time. They have like checklists and spreadsheets, right? One issue. You got 3 issues, call 3 times. But anyhow, here's and Bernie talked about and rent a hall and invite a bunch of people and then invite your member of Congress to come and speak to your group. So, but here's what Emily Ellsworth said. She said, first, tweeting or writing on Facebook is largely ineffective. And keep in mind, she worked in a congressional office. I never looked at those comments except to remove the harassing ones. Second, write a letter to the district office, the state office, is better than sending an email or writing a letter to D.C. But the most effective thing, Emily Ellsworth writes, and you can follow her on Twitter, by the way, at Editor Emily. But the most effective thing is to actually call them on the phone at their district state office. They have to talk to you there. She said, we repped 500,000 people. It was impossible to read and personally respond to all their letters. Impossible. This is something in particular that I cared about as a staffer and worked very hard, but the sheer volume of email is overwhelming. So we batched them with computer algorithms and sent out form letters. She said, but phone calls, that was the thing that shook up our office from time to time. One time, a radio host gave out our district office phone number on the air. He was against our immigration policy and told our constituents to call, and they did all day long. All I did that day was answer phones. It was exhausting, and you can bet my bosses heard about it. We had discussions because of that call to action. If we started getting a pattern of calls, I called our D.C. office and asked if they were getting the same calls, and we talked. If you want to talk to your, and so, you know, call. And from time to time, I'll be sharing my suggestions on that, but you can figure this out yourself. Finally, she says, if you want to talk to your representative, show up at town hall meetings. Get a huge group that they can't ignore. Pack that place and ask questions. We held town halls consistently that fewer than 50 people showed up for. And it was always the same people. So shake it up. And then finally, she says, are you noticing a pattern here? The staff are the ones who run the ground game for Congress. Work on helping them understand and learn. She writes, I loved getting out of my office and meeting with advocates in immigration, healthcare, education, science. She said, invite staffers on field trips and show them what it's like in your communities. Show them the work that you are doing. It works. She said, because if the staff knows you when they have a question, you will be the one they called. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's solid. Do it. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We're going to have Judson Phillips of the Tea Party here for a debate in about a half hour. It's going to be a real interesting afternoon, so stick around, and we'll be back with your calls after this.